Hello and welcome to the next episode, the next lesson of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Reusch, a high school teacher in Los Angeles. And today I'm very excited to have on the 2020 National Teacher of the Year, Tabatha Rosproy. I've had on a couple of National Teachers of the Year because education it's like my realm, and I think it's really, really important. And I see education as the way that we solve all problems. So, I'm always excited to have influential teachers who are really at the top of their game. So Tabatha, thank you so much for being here. I really am excited to talk to you.
You're welcome, Will. I'm glad that we could connect, and I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah, I'm kind of a squeaky wheel. I'm always just like trying to hey, what about me? Hey, come on, want to do my podcast? Want to do my podcast? It's like
You're hustling.
Okay. Yeah, I get that a lot from a lot of people. So you're first of all, how does it feel to be recognized as the National Teacher of the Year? That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's an incredible honor. This time last year, if you would have asked me, what would the world be like? I wouldn't have guessed how it is right now. And B, what would I be doing? This was never even something I knew was a possibility. So I think overwhelmed still appropriately sums it up, but also extremely honored and really excited to further the work of early childhood educators across the country.
Yeah. So the program that you started this program, right?
Yes, I was one of the people that helped get it running.
Okay. So essentially what it is, and I want you to go into more detail about it, but essentially what it is it's a pre-K, it's like a preschool set within a retirement center. Mm-hmm. So you have this mix of elderly and basically like 4-year-olds interacting regularly. I read a book by Senator Ben Sasse a little bit ago called The Vanishing of the American Adult. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how segregated people are. So not just by race or by culture, but also by age. Is that people just hang out within their age group and they don't learn the wisdom and things from elderly people. This is a really brilliant idea, Tabitha. Really is. Like, how did you think of this, and what were some of like the kind of stumbling blocks to get this to happen? Because this would be something that would be awesome to scale out, right?
Absolutely. And the thing is, it wasn't an original to us idea. It is something that isn't common, but is maybe more popular in some coastal cities. Mm-hmm. And also I'm so sorry, I have foster kittens, and you hear their little jingle bells. Listeners, if you hear their jingle bells, I'm so sorry. But it's more common in the coastal cities or overseas. And there is also in Kansas a kindergarten inside of a nursing home in Coffeyville, Kansas. And so we really worked with them to help understand their model when Winfield USD 465, which is the school district I work for, decided they wanted to do this. The idea really came out of a group of people called the Early Childhood Readiness Coalition here. And our superintendent at the time had heard of this program in Coffeyville, and the whole coalition was designed to understand what the needs of early childhood in our community were, because Winfield has always been a place that has invested in our youngest learners, and we offer free public preschool to any 4-year-old. We also have a 3-year-old program and some incredible parents as teachers programs, which is really uncommon to provide free preschool. And so we knew that we needed more, though. Parents needed access to a full day of education. That was a barrier to their family's success when their 4-year-old can be in school all day, because we offer half-day programs for free at that time. And so we're like, what are the opportunities? We need more space. We need more volunteers. And, those were things we were making priorities: community interaction in our classrooms and relationships. And my superintendent approached Cumbernauld Village, where we are housed. And by the time he got back to his office, he had a message that said, "We're in, what do we need to do?" And so it went from there, right? Just like 2 years of development and working with architects and lawyers and all of the red tape. But yeah, it was about 2 years of planning from that point.
I look for these things all the time, just in economics or whatever it might be. I look for these things in like economics or wherever it is, where it's like a win-win, where it's like a win all around. because I think that efficiency is really a way to solve a lot of problems. And we're just inefficient in a lot of ways, just as we develop over time. But like, I have the book Man's Search for Meaning behind me, fantastic book about searching for some meaning in life. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. But when you're elderly, that, and it's just, whatever, it's bingo night, bingo day every day. It's just the same kind of thing. You don't get your brain stimulated, but you have to watch out for these, these rugrats. Like, it's so bad to say, but then it gives them a reason to wake up in the morning. It gives them something to like look forward to. And that is not insignificant for all of us.
I knew that my students were going to benefit, and we can get into more of that later. But what I didn't know, I had read the benefits of interacting with younger generations and, done some research on that, but the renewed purpose that it would bring to the residents' lives there, the joy that it would bring, the decrease in depression, the more social activity, and like you spoke about, more stimulation of their brains. It had really connected them to a time in their lives where they were raising children or when they were children themselves. And we just saw the facility come alive when we moved in.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the big, I guess what I'm seeing now is there's a lack of wisdom being given to like younger generations. And it's not just knowledge, but like the wisdom, the lived experiences of like, I've been through a lot, let me pass this on to you. And I think a lot of elderly people want to do that because they were a lot of hard learned lessons. What are some of like...
You've frozen, Will.
Oh, you got me?
Oh, there, you're back.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I was just saying, there's a lot of wisdom. I think wisdom is very valuable. And I see that as different than knowledge. These really hard fought, lessons that elderly people or older people have learned. Like, do they pass those on to the kids? I know the kids are young, but is it something where like, what can young people learn from the greatest generation that you've seen? Like, are there big nugget wisdoms, essentially?
There's a lot of natural, wisdom being passed just by our interactions daily, but there's also some intentional planning of that going on our part. Our kids don't know what the world was like before they could get on mommy's smartphone. There's some of them are more competent with technology than I am. They just pick it up so quickly. And so for them to be not only hearing about what life was like before they were born, to imagine a world outside of yourself when you're 4 years old is already a huge thing. But to connect them to their past in a way that can still shape who they are is something really profound. When we call our grandparents, the volunteers who work with us, come in and share not only stories, but like artifacts from their history. One of our grandmothers shared the school bell that she used to ring when recess was over or when lunch was over, told us all about her one-room schoolhouse and like what the jobs were like of the teacher and of the students at that time. Or they share, items from their travels around the world and their history. I always think, if these people don't have any kids or not near their families, those stories and that wisdom would be lost.
Yeah.
But now my students get to soak it up and they get to take it with them as they grow, which is huge to me, especially when you see that families are no longer as connected to their distant relatives as we may have been in the past. And so it's just something really meaningful for both parties.
Yeah, I married into a Filipino culture. My wife's Filipino, and like the difference in the way that the elderly are treated in like at least her part of that culture is really interesting. I think we could learn a lot from it. It's a very American thing to kind of put someone in a home and just kind of out of sight, out of mind. You go visit them from time to time, but they're not a regular part of your life. And that seems like it's sad and it's a shame, but it's also just like, it's a waste of great resource. Just thinking like, as like an economics person, is we have so much to learn from them. And the more that we can tap into that, I just think the better. Do you think that this would scale up to, middle school, elementary school, middle school, high school?
Oh yeah, I definitely think it could. I think there's something really magical about seeing, someone 4 and someone 104
Yeah.
connecting, oldest and youngest in our world. But I think that, I have friends that teach middle school and high school that have partnerships with nursing homes and retirement villages. Now they're smaller scale,
Mhm.
but their stories are also really moving. A lot of, especially like troubled kids who maybe are not connecting with their peers or their teachers in class, are making connections with people in a completely different generation and lifetime that they have been in. And I definitely think it could work. I would love for this idea to spread to every nursing home in my community, to every nursing home in the world, because like you said, there is untapped potential and resources in our nursing home. And a lot of people when they retire, um, they get a little bored, actually. This is what
Yeah,
I hear from my retired friends.
for sure.
If they're not super active in their community organizations, or maybe they were at once and now they don't drive anymore, or they don't know as many people because some of their friends have passed on, they are still able to offer so many valuable things. And so I would love to see this connect to many age groups.
Yeah, well, I'm down to help that happen any way I can, because it's, I guess I'm always trying to think like outside the box to help improve education. I think the education system in America has some wonderful things about it, and I think it has some flaws with it. Like, I guess one of my biggest issues, and I would love to get your thoughts on this. I feel like when in early childhood education and elementary school, even, there's a lot of critical thinking. It's a lot of like imagination stuff. It's a lot of thinking outside the box. A lot of like, how many jobs can you come up with for these toothpicks or something like that? And then you get to high school. I've taught in a bunch of different high schools, very diverse communities throughout Los Angeles and in Philadelphia. And I feel like somewhere the change happens where we exchange imagination for like compliance. Like
Yes.
a good student in second grade is someone who can really have a crazy imagination and make a whole big castle and stuff. But then a good student in 11th grade is someone who just does what they're told, who
Yes.
stays quiet and raises their hand, and like, I feel like there's something. It's nice to have those kids who comply, but you're missing something really important. And I don't want to build what William Dereshowitz calls excellent sheep. We want innovators. We want, thinkers and things like that. What are your thoughts on that? Does that
Yeah.
seem accurate or?
Oh, absolutely. And well,
Okay,
I could talk about this forever and ever. So you've asked the
please,
right person this
please.
question.
Okay.
I first of all want to say I also love public schools. I believe in them 100%, but I always say, and you'll hear me say this publicly, you can love something an awful lot and still want it to change and grow, right? We see the potential that it
Yeah.
has, and it's okay. It's okay for me to critique this system that I'm a part of. And I think that some people mistake that for harsh judgment or lack of support, but really it's just wanting to help something you love grow. And so
I
I
love that, by the
definitely
way.
see, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really, I'm similar. Yeah.
I love that young children are encouraged to think critically and outside of the box and really have interpersonal relationships. And I think sometimes people mistake that playfulness for lack of professionalism on the teacher's part or lack of rigor in their classrooms. But the
Yeah.
thing is, preschool and early learning grades, they're doing it right. That's how students all learn. Kids all learn best through play, through open-ended questioning, through hands-on activities, and through some self-led experiments, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are they interested in? And so for sure we move from that environment to one of compliance in the later grades. And I really think it's based a lot around high stakes testing, right? So we see at the end of early childhood, about third grade, is when that happens. And I don't think that that's any mystery about why it does. It's because your brain has, gone through some big developmental changes in those first 8 years. And that's when they start really pushing that testing. And I think teachers would love to do things more like the early grades do, but they feel really pressured, not only to teach to the test, but to prove that they're doing their job to these people who don't work in classrooms or have any experience with children besides maybe having their own children. But we all know that you don't have to have a degree or do any
Yeah.
research to do
Yeah.
that. And so many of us are just like, what do we do with this this kid that I have in my house? And fortunately there are experts, right? people who work in schools are experts on developmentally appropriate practice. And I see some of us really being, stifled by policy and being unable to give our kids what we know is best.
Do you have, yeah, I mean, there's so much there. Like just when you watch, I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and like, my 3-year-old just started riding a 2-wheeler from his strider, and he fell over and over again. And he just was like, all right, get back on and go. And it's like, oh my gosh, I could learn so much from you. Like just the way that young kids deal with failure is just, there's no like, I'm a loser. It's just like, all right, they understand that it's part of the process, and we lose that. And that's such a shame, because I see so many high school kids that are just resist failure. Oh no, I can't fail at all. Like, they have this fear and it doesn't happen, but it's coming. Like, we're going to fail in life, you know?
It starts early on, that pressure to succeed. And that's why I said, I'm not against data. I'm not against testing in general. I know that we need data for lots of reasons. You know, I have a special ed degree, so I love data. Yeah. But it's the environment and the culture around it that make it high stakes, right? The pressure that we put on kids, the pressure that we put on teachers, students feel that. They know that we feel stressed out about fitting, a certain amount of minutes of things every day, and teaching them down to the last drop of this standard. Like, I've got to cover it all, but maybe not cover it all as well as I would like to, or your brain is ready for. And so it just, it's definitely, it's definitely an issue within our system.
Are you seeing like your position now as, National Teacher of the Year, that you are like, all right, well, I'm going to kind of go in and slay this dragon to some degree. Like, I'm going to try and push this idea, like the stuff that you're saying about, well, the high stakes testing, all the stuff that you're saying here. Are you is this like a place because you have an elevated voice now where you can advocate for those ideas?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's definitely, a part of my platform is to address what's developmentally appropriate, right? Mm-hmm. And, it is so hard. So many people are invested, in things like Common Core and in testing, which all have merit and value. And so I have to sort of be careful about how I word that so that I don't alienate anyone. But what my goal is to do is to just educate people on what's developmentally appropriate, and hope that we can move towards that and realize, okay, we have to lose this in order to get here where kids really need to be. And so it's not really part of my agenda to push out high stakes testing in any way, but to get people to reevaluate the way that we deliver that, and the culture that we have in schools in general, and see how we can make data gathering a little bit more seamless and anecdotal.
Yeah, like I've told students before, like I have other teachers who are like, when they say don't cheat, they put the blinders on the desk and, don't cheat. And I just sometimes, and I don't know how much this works, but it seemed to work fairly well. Is I say, like, guys, this school is practice. It's life practice. And why would you ever cheat in practice? Like, if you're playing basketball, you don't lower the rim to 8 feet and move the lines in, because come game time, you're not going to be prepared. But school is like life practice. If you cheat now, what's going to happen? And we see what happens because we see the cheating that goes on in, Wall Street or wherever you want to point to. There's, there's this like, I got to keep up with the Joneses. I got to keep up. I got to do all this stuff. And that starts in our realm. It starts, early with you, and then all the way through high school with me. And that's worrisome, because there's real problems in the world. And I think that they could be solved if people just were able to take a step back and think their way through things a little bit, and not just work. Just work more efficiently, I suppose.
Well, honestly, cheating is a little bit, just the idea of that is a little bit survival. We've sort of, again, put so much pressure on our kids to succeed on a test, that they think that's the only way. Like, they don't do it because they're malicious or terrible people. They do it because there are stakes there. There are things at risk. Their scholarships, their grades, their parents' opinion of them, their colleague, their peers' opinion of them. And so kids naturally, when they're younger, want to please people, right? And so we have to teach them to think critically, because we don't want them to just please people, because that leads to just an array of bad decisions in life, right? Yeah. Like, that's sort of where like peer pressure comes in. And I think that's where cheating comes in too. It's just another result of wanting to please people and wanting to succeed.
Yeah, the I wanted to talk to you about, because also with early childhood education is well, my 3-year-old's out now, but he was going to a preschool. At one point, we had both of them in a preschool up the road. It's expensive,
Yes.
and I have friends who are, you know, hedge fund people in New York who go to those really expensive schools where they test your kid in all kinds of ways, like, okay, and build a block wall, click. Like, oh my god, like that's like starting all this stuff that we're a little, both of us are a little upset about early.
Yeah.
But everyone talks about the cost of college and the cost of college going up, and everyone says I gotta save for college, but what pre-K schools are expensive.
They
I
are.
mean, hundreds, thousands of dollars, you know, sometimes per month. Like, what do you, what that, I don't hear that much in the conversation. Like, yours is a free public school.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, but, and then in some areas there are good free public schools, but
Mhm.
again, that's not the case everywhere.
Oh, it's uncommon. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
okay,
super uncommon. Yeah.
yeah.
They're
Is that
expensive.
part of what you're kind of focused on? Is like, how do we get good early childhood education?
Absolutely. My like pie in the sky goal is universal pre-K all over the country, right?
Yeah.
Kind of starting with 4-year-olds, and working our way down. I think it would be important to have care for all kids under 5, right? Not only to serve the kids best, but to be serving families too. Like, how can we help families succeed and be able to contribute and work all the things that people politically want them to do, but they don't have access to these quality learning programs. And even in my rural community where we have free 4-year-old preschool, that's half a day for most of our students, and we have very few child cares. So we're facing a real childcare crisis and a real preschool crisis.
Mm.
What I remind myself on this uphill battle is, just recently was kindergarten. In the last decade did it go full day here, and even later than that became mandated by our state, right? So now it's sort of preschool's turn. So it's a fight for legitimacy. It is a fight for early childhood, and what I hope to do is really just add some fuel to that fire and to get people to understand how important the early years are to development, and what factors that we can mitigate early on. We're not going to have to throw our resources into down the road, because we've prevented some of those like special needs or at-risk students from needing so many services later in life, when sometimes it's too late, so to speak, to correct some of those pathways that have started to form, that all of us do between 0 and 5 years old.
Yeah, and I think I think it's really cool that you were represented, or you were acknowledged for your work with pre-K, because I don't think that pre-K gets the respect that it should. And you probably feel that. And you probably still feel that. Like, I don't know if you do, but like, I'm guessing that there are some teachers who are like, oh, come on, she's just, what, I don't know, I don't want to insult, but like, whatever they might be, like, just a daycare, anyone can do that. It's like, well, anyone can do plumbing, doesn't mean that they do it well. Like, I can go in and just like glue a pipe together. Like,
and honestly, when people say I'm like daycare, I think that's diminishing the daycare. Like,
yeah,
they do that really well. That's not my job, and this isn't their job. We do serve some different purposes, but it is absolutely, there's a narrative about early childhood preschool teachers that is maybe taken less seriously. So being named National Teacher of the Year is a huge step forward for early childhood educators, I think.
You're the first, right? Are you the first?
Yeah, I'm the first
awesome.
in the history of the program, and I feel the weight of that responsibility, right? And I don't want to waste this time, and I want people to know that we are professionals, highly educated, highly motivated, and I want to provide that voice to early childhood educators across our country.
Yeah, is that partially, like, is there less of an educational requirement? Like, do you not need a bachelor's degree? Like, why is it that they're not given the same respect? Is that why? Is it like the level of education?
So if you teach for a public school, you have to have the same degree as your K through 12 colleagues, right? Like an early childhood education degree or special education. But there are some programs like Head Start, for instance. I worked for them for 4 years, and they were in partnership with a public school. but we were required to have a 4-year degree, but not all Head Start programs require that. But because of new policies in place, they will hire teachers that don't have 4 years, and then will help them get that degree. They want them to all be there by a certain amount of years after they start. And so I think that is maybe originally where some of that came from. You didn't have to have that degree, but I want people to know that that was about access more than anything in the communities. So like when Head Start began years and years and years ago, communities didn't have any pre-K early learning programs, and they didn't have people who were interested in teaching them. Because they for one reason or the other didn't take that age seriously. And so I think they also opened up access for adults in their community to gain education. So not only were they providing childcare and preschool, they were providing jobs for the communities that they were in. And so yeah, we are definitely moving towards that. There are some private schools that have more lax expectations of their staff, but the thing is, I went to school for 4 years. I believe in education. I went to school longer than 4 years, to college, but I learned more in the classroom than I learned in school, because it was like that hands-on application. So I love programs that are like getting our paraeducators their teaching degrees, or accelerating that path for them, because collegiate education is super important. And I do think that giving everyone the chance to access that is incredible. But I also know that real world experience is also very valuable.
Yeah, I'm like torn on that, because I feel the same thing. My wife, runs a successful business and like a salon and stuff like. Well, California's shut down right now, but she didn't go to college. She just kind of learned by starting a salon. And I have students who want to get into business and like, oh, I have to go get a business degree, and it's like, maybe you do, maybe you can start a business, but even that's another thing that I've gotten from a lot of pushback from parents and administration and stuff like that. Like, no, every kid needs to go to college. It's like, I don't know if that's true. And why are we holding this up? Like the burden of the cost of college, and some kids just like need to get out of the classroom and get their hands dirty. Like, kids are different. Kids are different. Why are we trying to make this into a cookie cutter thing? You see drastic differences even at 4 years old, right? As far as like where they excel, like the abilities of kids are just so diverse, right? Even at 4 years old, you can see that.
Yeah, totally. And I totally agree about that. With college, I feel torn about it too. When they first started allowing people who didn't have an education degree to teach in the classroom, I was really concerned, because pedagogy is really important. Understanding developmentally appropriate practice is important. And I was worried, I was like, does my degree mean less now, this investment that I made, because, they're easing up on some of these regulations? Is this going to affect our kids negatively? But what I realized was that was just like society gatekeeping, right? Like certain people were allowed to do this, and certain people weren't. And so, now I've sort of shifted my thinking on this. And I think that there are a lot of teachers in the classroom who really don't want to be teachers. And there are a lot of people that maybe do, and that maybe have those skills that are just untapped, like the people in the nursing home. Like, is there someone out there who got a math degree and, is working at, Fortune 500 company or something, and would much rather be fulfilling their purpose, in a community service role? And I think that, we should allow some flexibility in that.
Yeah, I think part of it is, and I've talked to people from like Scandinavian countries and stuff like that about education, and it is different. It's not viewed the same way here. I mean, like, I'm like a dude, like I do like jujitsu and I go hunting and all that kind of stuff. And like
my brother.
See, sometimes like when I'm in a group of like dudes and we're all like talking around about what they do, it's like, oh, well, I'm an attorney. Oh, I'm a financial analyst. And then I'm like, I'm a high school teacher. There's like a level that there's like an element there that it's like, oh, like it's like looked down upon. And maybe this is like my own personal stuff. I don't know. But I don't know if teachers are given the respect that we should have. And I don't mean to complain about it, but I think that part of what it is I think teachers aren't just like the holders of knowledge. Because I say all the time, the day I could be replaced by Google is the day I should. I'm not the one who's holding on to all the presidents in order, but I'm a translator. I try to explain why this material is important for you, and I can do that better than Google. So So there's, what we do is important, but it's just society doesn't seem to recognize it. They give a lot of like lip service to it, but I don't know if we really put it as a priority nearly as much as we should. But that's probably a common gripe among us.
I agree with that. And I think that just sort of in our society, money equals power. And in the way that we reduce power for teachers is often in the way that we pay them. And that directly shows, what we value about their work. Unfortunately, that's just, how society is. The more we pay you, the more we value your work. And it's just so arbitrary. It's like, who really sets that? Somebody was telling me, who's been teaching for 25 years, our principal at our school this year was saying her first year teaching, she made $13,000 that year. Yeah. And I think about that. I'm like, that was only 25 years ago. That is not that long ago. Right. And, she was a single mom. And I just was like, that's insane. These public servants who are dedicating their lives, their entire lives to educating our students. And sort of that's the monetary value that we place on it. And so I feel like as educators, we also have a role in shaping that. And, people have different opinions about teachers unions, and my opinion is that that's a place to get my voice heard. And so it's a place that trains me in advocacy and helps me, not only speak up for myself, but for other people. And in some places that's maybe not needed, or in some places it's really needed. But I would encourage people to just get involved in any professional organization that you can, to be a voice for your career, because the world will never care about it as much as you do. And so, you kind of have that responsibility to bear.
Yeah, I think unions are complicated. I talk to people because like the nature of the podcast is like all different perspectives on stuff.
Right.
And, there's positives to it, of course, because that's what got, a living wage for a lot of people in this field. And then there's ways that like, can you come tutor me after school? No, I can't, because my union won't let me. So there's like, there's ways we can just, like you said about the education system, we can tweak it. We don't have to, dismantle the whole thing or anything like that. You tweak it just like we should do with a lot of things in society. Is we have to just find what are the problems and how do we fix those essentially.
Oh yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. So homeschooling is a faction of schooling that's growing a lot right now. People are pulling their kids out of school because they don't feel like it's like it's serving them, or that it's too politicized and things like that. I worry about, I think it's like, again, like everything else, like there's a worry that I have about pulling your students out of school as opposed to trying to improve the school. Or, going to a private school or charter schools. I taught at charter schools. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But we need to focus on how do we get good education for every kid, because this is something that when we talk about equality, like you got to give every kid a chance. And that's not just something that'll just happen. We have to really put that as a priority. But why do you think that so many people are pulling their kids out of school, like public school or charters or whatever, to do like homeschooling? I just read that that's the biggest faction of school that's growing right now, even before coronavirus, is homeschooling. Why do you think that is?
In my experience, which is, sort of what I can speak to, in my community, a lot of people I know that homeschool their children do so maybe for religious reasons. Okay. Maybe they can't afford private school, but they want their children to have some element of religion, which in public school we serve students of all faiths, right? And so we have to just be really careful about that. But some of them are also just because, like you said, they want their learning to be led by their children's interests, and at a pace that is for them. And one thing that's unfortunate about public school is that our classrooms are packed, right, to the brim, which I'm sure you're aware. And it is kind of hard to give individual attention. Now, it's not impossible. And I think that with more resources or, redistributing our resources in some ways, that we could make that more possible. But I do think that, I have seen homeschooling grow in some popularity and in legitimacy, right? When I was a kid, I barely knew any homeschool kids. And so now I know a lot more as an educator, but I also live in a bigger town now. But I think that I almost find it funny that people are pulling their kids if it's because of political reasons. When I was in school, my experience, I didn't know what my teachers were, and I was asking them. I was that kid who was trying to understand and really wanted to egg them on a little bit
Yeah.
and they would never share their political affiliations with me. And so when I hear families getting upset that they think that, maybe schools become political, I just wonder where that's really coming from. Like, what actually happened that made them think that? But I think what we also have to remember is public schools a social program, right? They were founded to, bridge the gap, to create more equity in our communities and provide access. And so I think that in some ways, when you're within a social program, it's maybe going to seem a little more progressive, just because it has to be. It has to be. They are connected to policies and politics in some way. But in my experience, there's never been anybody telling any kids, how to vote, what their affiliations are. I feel like, if anything, we're actually super careful about not doing that.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, because I do know teachers that do that. And I think that no matter which way it is, and teachers are going to be more on the left side of politics, I think, just because teachers unions and stuff like that are usually aligned with Democrats.
Right. More popular. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does happen, on the right. I'm sure in Kansas you get it probably, from the right as well, of like, I don't like, this person's a bad, like, we need to stop doing that as educators. We need to really stop pushing our politics, I think, as like the way. I teach government and civics and economics, but like, I used to keep it very close to my chest, and now I'm more open because I am just personally politically homeless. Like, I like the best ideas. So I'll hear out, people on the left, people on the right, like, what are the best ideas? What are the best ideas? I don't know. And my kids are older, they're seniors. So it's like a think tank. Like, I have a kid who's like, whatever, pick a like controversial, pro-choice, then pro-life. And we'll talk about it. And as soon as it becomes personal attacks, like, that's out. As soon as it's like, you're wrong or whatever, or this is bad, like, let's have a conversation, get back to that curiosity we were talking about earlier. I don't know. I know that we're passionate. I know that teachers are passionate, but I do worry about the pushing of, this is the right way to vote or to think, just because of the nature of this podcast and the way I am. I've just talked to so many people from across the spectrum that are just good people that I might have strong disagreements with, but I understand why they think what they think and stuff like that. That's just something I hope that we as teachers can just model, that like general curiosity. Like, wow, you think so differently than me about this person, or that, whatever, like Orange Man, or about like really anything. And why? Like, why? I know you to be a great person, and your politics are just so different than mine. Why is that? I'm just like, I would love to see more of that curiosity, I suppose.
Well, yeah, and to teach kids how to question appropriately, right? And that's something that I didn't learn. From a young age, I think I would be offended when you disagree with me, because in some way that means you don't value me or my opinion. But just, I think that investigation, right, is something that you can teach without any political leaning, but like how to be a part of a conversation and how to process that information. And also teach them that it's okay to change their mind. Like, just because your parents believe something, or me, who you look up to, also believe something, that doesn't mean that you have to, but you have to, again, think about those issues and what is important to you, but not only what's important to you, what's important for everybody.
Yeah, and lead with kindness. Like, the lack of kindness among people who disagree with you in society right now is very worrisome. Just like, oh, you think differently than me, you're a bad person. And we're just getting pulled apart, where we need, this is the time. I mean, this is the time for us to come together and care for one another as Americans, just like you said, with regards to the education system, like even this country. I mean, we clearly have work to do. We've come a long way, and the conservatives will say, look how far we've come. True. And look how far we still have to go.
Absolutely.
And those two can hold the same ground. Like, why can't we just work together and see that and recognize that? But people are just digging their heels in so much.
I know. If you stop growing, like, where are you then, right?
Yeah.
You. And one of my other favorite quotes is, how will you ever become polished if you're irritated by every rub? And so I am always like, okay, how do I not be irritated by someone who disagrees with me or challenges what I think? But that does take a level, again, of self-reflection and critical thinking and positive intent for others. And those are things we should be teaching in school, right? That is so important. The politicians of tomorrow are in our class today. Someone said that to me recently, and I wish I could attribute it to the person that was, but I've totally forgotten.
Well, we need leadership. So,
Yes,
so let's get on it, educators. This is really great. I'm thrilled that NEA, chose you for this position, Tabatha. I think that that's who chooses it, right?
Oh no, sorry.
Oh, okay.
CCSSO, the Council of Chief State School Officers, which is a huge nonprofit, but this is just one sector of that, the National Teacher of the Year program. They sort of are an organization that many of our state superintendents or chiefs or commissioners of education belong to, and they've got a lot of wings of their organization and involvement with work in policy and equity, and this is one of them.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. Is there anything that you would like to just put out there as like something for the teachers listening to just focus on that we haven't covered? Anything else that is kind of like that you want to I'll give you the floor essentially to make your
one big thing that maybe we didn't touch on and that I care a lot about is just that idea, and it goes along with what we've been saying, is that idea of social emotional education being one of our jobs at every age level. And so again, people think it's my job in preschool or it's my friend's job in kindergarten, but I would argue and defend forever that it's our job as teachers in every grade. Our brains are not fully formed until we're like 24 years old. And so there's so much learning of interpersonal skills and self-regulation that is happening every day. And our kids need assistance with that. They don't know. People just assume they know how to behave. They know how to solve problems. But that's not true. It's just not true. I'm still learning. In my 30s, I'm still learning how to do that. And I think a lot because, my parents, my teachers, they did what they knew, but I want to do better now because I know better. And I want to help educators across the country do that too. And so I'd love to talk more about that too, maybe at another time, but that is one huge issue that I care a lot about.
Absolutely. And you look around, we have no time has been better in human history as far as comfort and luxuries and things like that. But where we're struggling, what has never been higher is opioid overdoses, heroin overdoses, suicide, mass shooting, depression, SSRI, prescriptions and stuff like that, anxiety, the amount of kids that I have that have diagnosed anxiety and depression, that's a real concern. So I'm glad you brought that up, and that's going to be a part of using your voice for that, because how to deal with this life, the struggles of life, and life is hard. And I love that quote about the rub, because you're going to develop scars, emotionally, physically. It's going to be tough, and we have to equip these young people on how to deal with that, because life is so comfortable in some ways, and that's going to lead to so much discomfort in other ways, I suppose.
Right. We have a real aversion to discomfort, I think, in our society. Yeah. But honestly, that's where we grow, and that's how we learn. Conflict is how we learn. And I think that we just need to teach our kids how to cope with that, but not only to survive, but to thrive, to be able to move past that and learn and grow. And, there's a huge percentage of children in trauma. And so we don't only have, there's not just a need, there's an obligation, right? That's part of our purpose as educators, is to meet our kids where their needs are. And like you said, there's crisis, there's mental health crisis, there's, drug crisis. And so we sort of have to shift some of our purpose to managing that.
For sure. Cool. Tabatha, this was a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on here, sharing with my audience. Where can people see what you're up to, follow kind of your journey for this? So, what a year, 2020. I know. Oh my gosh.
It's just a weird year, but they can follow. I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at Tabatha Rosproy.
Okay.
Instagram is ntoy, NTOY 2020. Yeah. And on Facebook, you can just search National Teacher of the Year 2020 and my page will come up. But yeah, I am definitely, using that tool a lot, social media, during this time of virtual connection.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I use it a lot too. I think it's kind of the way, I'm a huge Mr. Rogers fan. And
Yes, I love Mr. Rogers.
did you see the documentary?
No, I haven't yet because I've been like, I know I'm gonna cry, so
Yeah.
I'm waiting.
Oh yeah. Oh, I cried like a baby. Yeah. It's so good. But he was watching television in like whatever the 60s. And he's like, what an amazing resource. And it's being used so poorly. It's being used for like violence and just like machine, robots blowing up other robots. He's like, we can use this for something positive. And that's what I'm trying to do with social media. Like, what does social media education look like if it's done positive, done well, and things like that? So then it'd be scalable. That's one of the things that's hard about education. So
Definitely.
very cool. All right, Tabatha, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you for doing this, and I wish you well on your journey, and I hope that we can keep in touch in the future.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Will.
All right.